So I think I've got 7 p.m. 1900 for those military folks. Um, I'm a currently retired Jim Rector, Executive Director for Army Engineer Association. I want to welcome everyone to the Engineer Rally Point. We haven't done one for a little bit, but we got a lot of information to go through. And so I'm not gonna waste any time. So I'll turn it over to our new Engineer Commandant, Colonel Steve Kolouch, sir.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Thank you all for joining us here this evening. And in true form, I see the participant count ticking up here just as the clock struck 07 Central Time. So I'm sure more folks are going to join us. Hey, this is a collaboration between our professional association, AEA, and Engineer School, one that we enjoy. We hope that continues. Major General Watson could not make it tonight. That's okay. We're going to drive on. We do have several members of AEA and board members here with us today. Always looking for new ideas, topics for future rally points. So if you have an idea, please come up on the net, myself, Mr. Jim Rector, or anyone that is with AEA. If you have an idea, this is a forum meant for our field. And so we've gotten our best ideas from the field. So please send us your cards and letters on some recommendations for topic areas. What we need tonight, please, what we need is your opinions, right? So this is for us, it's for you. Please come up with your opinions and offer them and to defend them. And the topic tonight is something that our Army has worked with and worked towards for many generations, frankly, and how to best align and integrate our reserve component capabilities with our active duty formations. So it's an old challenge, one that remains fresh for us and even more relevant into the future as we build 2030, as we move towards Army of 2040. Our reserve component, our Guard Reserve forces are part and parcel to our regiment, as we know. And so today we are thrilled to have a real treat with Brigadier General Pippy, who is served in all three components and is in a position to give us his well-formed thoughts about alignment. And so with that, General Pippy, sir, you're net.
Hey, great, Steve. Hey, it's good seeing. Congratulations again. Looking forward to getting down there and seeing you and the Sergeant Major. So I always appreciate that. As Steve said, John Pippy, I have the privilege of being the Deputy Chief Engineers for National Guard Affairs. So I work for General Spellman as a traditional guardsman out of the Corps of Engineer headquarters. My XO, Jesse Kopczynski, Major Kopczynski, actually used to work for Steve over there, the OC at the Pentagon. So if you have any questions after this briefing or looking for points of contact, think of us, regardless of what component you're in. Think of us as a point of contact that we can then get you to the right people. I have about 6 primary slides. They have a lot of information. I will not go into all the verbiage, but what I want to do is more have a discussion. So if you have a question, just put your hand up. If someone sees it and I don't respond, just someone give me a heads up. I have about 10, 15 minutes max to cover a topic that has been at the forefront, frankly, for a long time, as Colonel Kolouch has mentioned, but also most recently with some new published X awards at NGB, we have some alignment that is in the process of occurring, and I think will help us for the future fight. So if we go to the next slide. So before we get into where we are, it's important to understand kind of how this has evolved. I've been on active duty. First assignment was Fort Hood in 1992, 20th Engineer Battalion. They're still there as a platoon leader. Then joined the reserves when I got off active duty in the 99th, deployed OIF in 2003, and then 2004 became a Pennsylvania Guardsman. So the last 20 years, I've actually been in the Guard, and I've had a privilege to serve in mostly divisional units in maneuver support and maneuver units in different roles. So I've seen this evolve. Back in 22, the National Guard was looking, we have 8 divisions. How do we ensure that our brigades get the reps and sets and the mentorship we need So what the National Guard Bureau did was create an XORD called Operational Divisional Alignment. I have that slide in the background on the backup slides. But what it did was it aligned brigades, maneuver in sustainment and MEBs, an engineer brigade, or other brigades, 2 divisions for training purposes. So cross-state, example, 28th Infantry Division in Pennsylvania, our headquarters is at Fort Uniontown Gap. We have a 56 Stryker, we have 2nd Infantry Brigade, we have the 55th MEB, we have the 28th ECAB, and then we're standing up our Div Arty. As part of that alignment, we also got the 32nd IBCT out of Wisconsin, the 256 IBC out of Louisiana, the 371st Sustainment Brigade out of Ohio, and then also an engineer battalion, the 112th Engineer Battalion out of Ohio. And we've been working with MOUs between the states and the division and the adjutants generals to develop some of those training opportunities. What I would like to tell people is their latest XORD from 2024, earlier this year, now aligns our echelon above division brigades of functional, multifunctional brigades to active component corps. And the reason we do it, not only to help increase the partnerships, but also, you think about it, teach, coach, mentor opportunities. I'm lucky. I live in a state with 14,000 Army Guardsmen. I have a division headquarters. I've been able to serve, not without leaving my state, battalion, brigade, division, joint headquarters, and go back and forth. A lot of states don't have that. 54 states and territories and only 8 division headquarters. So this helps give some of the mentorships, but also it allows us to support our brothers and our brothers and sisters in arms as relates to the course and support their training initiatives. And then you can see the objectives below. The big thing here is understand this. Don't think of this as mutually beneficial relationships that will be driven by not only the division commanders, corps commanders, but also buy-in from the adjutants generals from all 54. So it's we are early in the process. Next slide, please. And these are just a couple of facts and assumptions. For those that aren't familiar with how COMPO II operates, we are a state-centric command and control. Adjutant generals retain the training readiness and command authorities for the units within their state. And that's critical as we look at how this would be implemented. So in my state, it's clear for me, but I mentioned the alignment with the Sustainment Brigade in Ohio. We don't have any authority on that. Everything there is coordinated through training opportunities. We don't have any command and control of the Sustainment Brigade in Ohio, even though we're aligned to them. And then and this does not replace any of the existing command relationships that are already occur. One of the benefits of putting this in an order and expanding this is a thought that if you look under the assumptions, we have a very different planning horizon than active duty, and especially for us with our 5-year rearm cycle, our limited training dollars. So if we can reduce some of the friction and allow for us to synchronize better, it will really, I think, help us achieve some of these long-term goals. For our side, the COMPO II side, there are a couple, statutory limitations we have as it relates to additional funding. There will not be any additional funding associated with this. There are some, the order sets some left and right limits and boundaries, and that just talks about planning horizons and priorities. Next slide. So this wasn't done in a vacuum. There was a lot of interaction and continues to be a lot of work with FORSCOM. So if you look on the right, the readiness opportunities are pulled directly from the FORSCOM commander's guidance document for the wins and the assessments. And then on the left, the echelons above division objectives are how we are helping achieve those opportunities. So whether it's by creating training relationships, promoting leader development opportunities. I just recently had a bunch of units down at JRTC, chemical, CAV, part of the CAV squad. We had aviation supporting another infantry brigades, JRTC rotation. You know, those types of rotations are generational rotations where you develop that generational readiness that we need. So, you know, those I think are very helpful. And on the bottom left, it just highlights some of the items associated with the benefits of the alignment and the partnerships. Long term, we hope to get everyone, at least in the COMPO II side, lined up. Those who are aligned for training are on the rearm cycle, so that their training years, ready years, all line up, so that you in a perfect world, you'll have a division commander going in the guard, a division commander going with his own or her own infantry brigade combat teams and strikers and everything, all at once, as opposed to the way it happens right now. Well, we get a lot of reps and sets. It's not usually with all the same organizations. Okay, next slide. Well, yep, next. Okay. So a couple of key takeaways. I'm going through this pretty quick because I want to respect the time for everyone and make sure we stay on track. This is a commander's program. It's got to be commander driven. Even on the divisional training alignment that we have within the National Guard itself, you know, different states, different divisions are at different levels of implementation. It's an opportunity. It's not a requirement. Mentorship and mutual benefits. We're already starting to see that. We're getting calls from different brigades asking for a high con or 1-2 star mentors for certain, CTC, XCT rotations. And it really, I think, will provide some predictability going forward as we start looking at the challenges of burst tempo and op tempo, especially with some of the domestic operation support that we do in the Guard. That's just built into everything we do. Okay, so next slide. I've been talking a lot. If we can go to this slide, this is the slide that shows the core partnerships and alliance that came out in the XORD. As you can see, if you look at 1st, 3rd, 18th, and 5th Corps, you know, you'll have multiple FA brigades, multiple MP, 2 FA brigades, 2 MP brigades, 2 engineers, a chemical, a couple MEBs. And the reason for that is part of the reason is because of the ability of support over a 5-year period. One brigade couldn't do everything that would be needed to support it. So that gives us some redundancy and allows us to balance while still getting those sets of reps. And, we like to see a vision where, we're all fighting off the same, TAC SOP, command post SOPs, and we're building, those reps and sets that will help us be successful. Any questions on this slide right here? Well, there's a couple of final thoughts as we look through this. This order has it's basically 2 phases. Phase 1, the planning phase, started back in September 23 and is here and will end roughly September 24. And it includes a collaboration with the FORSCOM, and it ends when phase 1 ends when the partnerships are documented in Army National Guard orders and published in FORSCOM's mission alignment order. Phase 2 of this is all about beginning to establish those memorandums of understanding. It's indefinite. There's no timeline associated with it. It will include structure changes, the ARSTRUC force design. Regular Army theater armies may request Army National Guard EAD partnerships, and TA 2630 annual assessments and feedbacks will align with FORSCOM mission readiness brief. So we're right at the early stage of this. The key here is, I'll just reiterate, the MOUs would have to be at the state G3, and then the division level. But once that's MOUs are done, then it's unit-to-unit coordination. So I went through a lot in a very short amount of time. I'll open it up for questions. The next slide just says questions and discussion. So why don't we just keep this up? Are there any questions or input or feedback? Pushback. Steve brought up a good point. Okay. Well, if there aren't any questions, then I mentioned, please feel free to reach out. This is in its early stages. Having done a lot of warfighters as a brigade and division engineer, protection chief, The stuff like, multiple 3-corps and other warfighters, those reps and sets have really helped us be ready to support, multiple deployments we've had over the years. So I think this alignment will help us be successful. So I'll turn it back over to the team, Jim, and I appreciate the opportunity to present.
Oh, hold on, Jim. Sir, I got something for you.
Yep.
And I know that everyone is just shell shocked that you communicated in such an executive manner, and they're ready for others who would just drone on, and you got right to the heart of the matter. So I'll let them gather themselves as I serve up the first softball for you. Sir, we've done this many times before.
Yep.
Through your career, which is a little longer than mine, but in my career too, and others here, different schemes out there. And in fact, you were on a panel last October talking about this also. When I was a battalion commander, it was the Associated Unit Pilot Program, AUPP. I was a battalion commander. I woke up in the morning, and myself and my commander, now General Quander, knew through a press release from the Army that all of a sudden different units were associated with each other, and we didn't know what that meant. And we frankly didn't really come to know what that really meant. All I know is we swapped patches, and I had a Texas Army National Guard ECC that was attached or affiliated, associated with my battalion. It was great. We had great training, and the commander and first sergeant came to all my events that they could, and we did training with them together. We thought it was mutually beneficial, and then it just kind of fell apart a year or two later. It wasn't coordinated, didn't come with funding. There was no real orders behind it. It was kind of an impromptu thing, I think, that the chief of staff at the time kind of just declared, maybe in conjunction with the NGB leadership. What's different about this current effort you described, and does it have the support of our seniors, and will it endure, sir?
Well, so if we could go back to the last slide, the one that shows the alignment. So a couple things, and Steve, I was the S3 for Second Infantry Brigade, 20th ID back in the day, about a little over 10 years ago, and we were aligned to the Infantry Brigade out of Fort Drum. I think it was first out of the 10th Mountain, and we never really did anything because there really wasn't a lot there other than what was being driven by the leadership. And with the turnover in leadership every couple of years, you really don't see it. I think there's two things that probably differentiate this from others, and probably I'm going to make a couple assumptions here as you look back on what occurred. This is being driven because there's a need at the corps level. I remember, and please, non-attribution on this stuff, but I remember these discussions a few years ago, and the comment was corps commanders really don't have time, and corps aren't really the right structure to have all these brigades aligned to them. They don't have time to train, mentor, teach brigade commanders, corps commanders. However, I would argue that I think having met, I actually know both the 3rd Corps and 18th Airborne Corps very well, commanders, and when we went there, when I was an acting division commander, met with General Donahue down in Gettysburg when he had all his division commanders in, they understand the need to have us supporting and rounding out, especially in warfighters, CTCs, NTC now, divisional NTC alignments, Eisenhower down there in 1st Armored. So this is being driven by the top, but it's not mandated. That's why I mentioned how important it is that that division commanders, adjutant generals on the guard side, and then frankly corps commanders on the other side, on the regular Army side, really embrace this. And so we've seen this. And we frankly don't have enough forces to meet the need for everyone. So there's definitely a need. And as you start looking at large scale combat operations, we understand we're going to have to fight as an integrated reserve, supporting everyone. And this is a way. It may evolve. It probably will evolve. It's going to take 4 to 5 years to get everything lined up, but at least I know 18th Airborne Corps is leaning forward. I know 5th Corps has already immediately sent memos out to West Virginia and other states that it's currently aligned with. So there's a lot of interest at the corps level. So hopefully that is a discriminator on this.
Hey, John, this is Kirk Daly from DAG9. I have just it's good to hear you and see the hard work that's gone into this. And I was wondering if you can pull it into what does this mean for the regiment, and if there are some opportunities for at the engineer brigade or battalion level, and maybe some of those impacts, and what we could look forward to in terms of the engineers side and how that integrates into this. Okay.
Yeah, Kirk, great to hear from you again, my friend. So I think a couple things for the regiment now. We start, when we start looking at talent management and opportunities for training and mentorship, it brings it aligns a lot of brigades that in the past, their primary focus may have and still will be their state, IA quarters. However, now with these relationships, I think it will get our forces and our talent pool, the reps and sets they need to be able to fight and provide maneuver support at the division and corps level, that's a skill set that unless you've done a bunch of warfighters, it's hard to learn. And so I think that helps us as it relates to building up the capability to look at the division as a unit of action and how we integrate in corps. And my career, I've had, seems like every other year I was either in a warfighter or enhanced response cell for a warfighter or a HICON. So, those reps and sets really help. I would argue that the second thing is hopefully down the road, we'll make it easy for people to go back and forth between the compos a little more and have a little more flexibility. That's more of a one side. But I think it will help strengthen us as an organization when people start seeing the opportunities and going back and forth. I regularly tell people that if we don't have what they need here in Pennsylvania, there's great opportunities in COMPO III. Over. Okay. Hey, I really appreciate the questions. Like I said, happy to talk to people or be a point of contact. And then, SAO team.
Hey, sir, Thane Startzel here.
It's dead.
If I could just ask a couple questions at the risk of sounding ignorant here about how the Guard and the reserves work. Just out of curiosity, what's that big blank band along the top of the U.S.?
You're talking about the white color for First Corps?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's just it. So look at that as a color scheme associated with First Corps, and it shows the units there that are supporting it. So if you notice, Pennsylvania, where I live, it's also white. If you were good, if we went to Pennsylvania, our units actually are aligned to our division, so we don't have a corps alignment. So if it's either First Corps or they're not associated to one of the other 4 corps. So if you look at it, the color scheme is it's a little hard because of the nature of what we do, but everything in yellow. Oh, correction, my bad. Everything in yellow is First Corps. Those are units that are not aligned to a corps. This just strictly covers the corps alignment. It threw me off actually because First Corps is up there in Washington. Does that make sense? So
Okay, so yeah.
If you go to the next slide, it'll be a little easier to see. If we go to one that shows a map. So if you look here, 55th Med, my old command that I used to command, we're aligned to 20th ID. 20th ID isn't aligned to a corps for training purpose. However, we have an affiliation with 5th Corps because our state partnership is Lithuania. We've been in the Baltics for 30 years. So I didn't have enough time to get into all the detail. So the ones that are white are states that don't have anything directly aligned to one of the 4 corps. That's probably a better way to say it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that, sir. And then the other question I had, I'm assuming the answer is no, but does the alignment with 5th Corps influence rotations of units to Europe for the Resolute Castle mission?
I don't know that answer specifically. It does not change. However, it may inform going forward. And there's some backup slides that talk about how we would Army National Guard ODT sourcing. Actually, I've sent forces to Resolute Castle, so there's a slide I have in the back that talks about the sourcing. If you have specific questions, just reach out to me or my XO. Happy to talk to you offline, and I'll make sure I connect you to the right people.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Hey, well, okay, great questions, everyone there. Like I said, I get excited. I love what I do. I've been doing this 32 years, so it's great to be around engineers. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
COL Dion, you are up.
All right, thanks, sir. So I am Rob Dion, and I'm the Engineer Organization Integrator at Headquarters GA G357 Force Management. Tonight I'm going to provide an overview of engineers required to support a division after the brigade engineer battalions have been inactivated. I just have this one slide, and I'll explain this concept first, and they can answer a couple of questions at the end of that. So one of the big changes the section of the Army approved earlier this year as part of Total Army Analysis 2529 was removing the brigade engineer battalions from the regular Army brigade combat teams, with the decision to divest of the National Guard brigade engineer battalions deferred to a future TA cycle. Now, removing the brigade engineer battalions was done as part of the Army shifts of the unit of action from the brigade combat team to the divisional level. And it also allowed us to reduce the size of the Army due to the current recruiting challenges. Now, the benefit of this is pulling engineers at the division level better allows the division commander to manage those engineer resources and weight the main effort as needed. Now, if you look at the icon in the slides, this depicts how a notional division with 3 intra-brigade combat teams would be resourced with engineers during large-scale combat operations according to rules of allocation. Now, the actual engineer support is dependent on what that specific operation plan requires, and what you see may be adjusted. Now, some of these engineers may also be pulled at the core level. Example, we got 2 multiple bridge companies shown under the division, but in the past, this has typically been a core asset and then pushed down to the divisions when needed. The opposite might also be true. Engineer construction companies are not shown on the slide and will be at either core level, or they might be assigned to divisions based off the number of construction projects that are being executed in that division area of operations. So those are why those specifically are not shown on the slide right now. Now you will notice that there's a dashed green box on the slide, and this shows the engineers that were added once the brigade engineer battalions were removed from the brigade combat teams. The brigade engineer battalions only provided about 25% of the engineer support required, so the majority of these engineers were already required and would have been resourced with either regular Army engineers currently assigned at the core or theater level or the reserve component. Now, using this notional division as an example, the 3 brigade engineer battalions with a total of 6 engineer companies were replaced with 1 engineer battalion and 5 engineer companies, and that's what you'll see in that green box. We did have a reduction in engineer battalion headquarters, but the goal was to keep the number of engineer platoons supporting the brigade combat team the same. Now, in terms of the resourcing this with regular Army reserve component engineers on the far left of the slide will likely be resourced with regular Army engineers. You can see there's 3 combat engineer companies, 1 supporting each infantry brigade combat team, and 1 engineer support company. This is a little less than 25% of the engineers required during large-scale combat operations, about the same that was previously provided by the brigade engineer battalions, and the remaining 75% of the engineers, those other 3 battalions that's shown on the slide with those downtrace engineer companies underneath them, will likely be provided by the reserve component. Now, replacing intra-brigade combat teams with either striker or armored brigade combat teams on this notional division will change the engineer support required because each of those formations have different rules of allocation for that drives the number of engineers that are supporting them. But you can see on the slide, based off of only that far left, column of engineers will likely be the reserve component. That's still a lot of engineers, the other 75% of there that we need the reserve component to provide that support when that division deploys to LISCO operations. So you can kind of see the challenges we have with the way we're organized as a force right now. 26% of the engineers are in the regular Army, and the other 74% are in the reserve component. So that's why it kind of works out with this notional division. About 25% of those engineers are resourced with the regular Army, and the rest or the reserve component. So kind of pause right here. You kind of see if you have any questions on what this new alignment looks like once the brigade engineer battalions went away, and we are 100%. Eventually once the National Guard divested their BEBs, 100% EAB force. So there's no longer any engineers organic to those brigade combat teams. Everything is part of that EAB tool. I don't see any questions right now, but tonight we talked about alignment of National Guard and reserve component engineers. Going forward, that is going to be important because when I talked about just from this slide, the reduction of those battalion headquarters in a 3 IBCT division. That before you had 3 engineer battalion headquarters, and now, that division is just going to have 1, right? So there could be challenges, during that with that 1 battalion, providing kind of like the same amount of support to that IBCT. I mean, they will have that engineer company aligned with them, but when you start looking into rotations to either GR2C or for like the armored formations, the ABCTs or the rotations. The troop lists, so the CTC rotations had to be adjusted to account for the change and that these engineers are no longer organic to those BCTs. So that is going to increase the amount of reserve component engineers that are required for the CTC rotations and potentially these rotations that we're doing overseas. All right, go ahead and pause again. So I'm not seeing any hand raised or don't see any comments. But unless there's anything else, that's the main thing I wanted to go over, kind of help everybody kind of understand what this alignment is going to look like once the brigade engineer battalions are gone away.
Hey, Rob, quickly, if you would, please speak to our National Guard and Army Reserves when it comes to their future changes. Maybe specifically to the Guard and their BEBs.
Yes, sir. So for the National Guard, let me back up a little bit. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these changes we made with the brigade engineer battalion being removed from the BCT only impacts COMPOII at this point. And in the last TA cycle, there was a number of other changes that the regular Army made to our brigade combat teams, and some of it was driven on the need to reduce the size of the regular Army due to the recruiting challenges. So all those changes didn't impact COMPO II at this time, and it was kind of deferred to a future TA cycle. The current TA cycle we're in right now is kind of a compressed TA cycle to try to get us back on track. So it won't be addressed in the current TA cycle we're in, but likely the next one or the one after that, once the National Guard has more time to kind of analyze what they need to do, because the things they need to analyze, kind of like what we did with COMPOII, is we use some of those spaces to draw down the Army, but then the other spaces we use to create additional EAB engineers. So the National Guard will have to do analysis to decide, okay, here's where we currently are in our force structure as an Army overall, and here are the gaps we have to meet the national defense strategy. So for our brigade engineer battalions, here's how we're going to reinvest that capability to create that EAB engineers. And we didn't want to, at headquarters DA, we didn't want to rush the National Guard into making a quick decision for that. So that's why they're being given additional time to conduct a thorough analysis and then come back to the Department of Army on how they're going to do their plan. Now we think in the end state, it's very likely that they're going to match what we're doing in COMPOII, at least in terms of the brigade engineer battalions and removing them from the BCTs. But the official decision has not been made on that at this time.
General Pippy, sir, you had your hands up at one point. Did you want to accept his answer?
I was gonna back him up, and he is 100% correct as it relates to the analysis. The other thing for those who are on that are COMPO II and that have an interest in specifically in this, once that analysis is done, it's still a sequencing by state, by unit. For example, when we look at the, BEBs, as well as the CAV that we have at the brigade level, that's about 10,000 soldiers. And so you have to see exactly what we're going to be needing and when we're going to need it and when we're going to sequence it, by state, by unit. In the perfect world, a unit would know, what they're transitioning to or work, locations, alignments, etc. So a lot to be determined. And I also think, we'll be seeing how this works on the COMPO I side, and if there are any adjustments needed based on the full implementation over.
Thanks, sir. Michael Chapman, your hand's up.
Hey, sir, it's Captain Chapman. I got a question. So since we're getting rid of the BEBs, do we foresee units like the 5th Engineer, like headquarters unit, going to CTC rotations more often now? Because normally you just see like kind of the line companies go out, and I actually think it'd be beneficial because I know at least in the 5th, we, other than a makeshift warfighter that we got into, the EAB battalion level doesn't really get exercised. It's more of the company level units that get exercised. And then what is will that make a rift in the like the CBRNE, the CBRN response and everything like that? How are we gonna double down? Because those headquarters are probably gonna get more utilized now and have to do more support operations.
A good question. And I'll give a stab at it, and then after I provide a response, I'll pause and let if someone else has an opinion to either refute or support what I said. Any training you get, any good commander wants to get as much training and as realistic a training as possible. And it's tough to beat CTCs, right? And so those are golden opportunities for learning and development and maximizing readiness of any unit. I don't see a direct correlation between some force structure changes and our EAB units getting, more reps per se at the CTCs. I don't quite see that happening. I do see the Army continue to resource enablers to support a maneuver as they go through the CTCs. And so on the COMPO I side, ForceCom, and then other components also have a chance to sign up units to augment maneuver as they go through the CTC. So those opportunities will continue for all three COMPOs. But I don't see a direct kind of correlation between some of the force structure changes that you mentioned and increased opportunities for battalion headquarters per se. I'll pause there for any other folks.
Yes, sir. I'll just comment. I could say I could possibly see some increased chances for the 5th Engineer Battalion and possibly some other units. As an example, now this was while we still had BEBs, but when I was in S3 in the Triple Nickel, the A64th, we wanted to go to a CTC rotations and we were able to link up with a BCT and was able to go to NTC and kind of help Mission Command, some of those additional enablers that were supporting that BCT. Now, when we look at our IBCT formations that are going to JRTC, in the past, there was that engineer battalion there that would go to every JRTC rotation with that BCT. Now, in that division, there's just going to be one engineer battalion. So it'll be hard for that one engineer battalion to support all three IBCTs going to, say, JRTC as an example. So I could see that as an example, whereas, the 5th Engineer Battalion or another one up at the forward level could potentially request to go to the CTC rotation to kind of cover down on an engineer battalion that would have been there, but can't anymore because we reduced some of those engineers that are in those IBC or entry divisions.
There you go, Captain Chapman, an optimist with Colonel Dion. And he sees a lot. He sees the playing field very well. So I take that as good feedback.
Thanks, sir.
I've got one question for Rob. It's right on in line with this. In regards to divisions going to CTCs, dirt CTCs, not warfighters, right? And do we see COMPO II, COMPO III engineer brigades going to those dirt CTCs as well as either low con response cells are playing in those CTCs at all in the future?
Well, I don't directly deal with that in the job I am right now, but I'd say, for my opinion of it, and kind of like what I can see, I don't see that increasing. Typically, you mentioned like those brigades are kind of at the war fighter in serving as response cells to those, and sometimes training audiences to those divisions and corps when they're doing their warfare exercises. So I see that's probably going to continue on. But there possibly could be some initiative to get those at the CTC rotations. It's just my current job, I'm not involved in that, and I haven't really seen that initiative moving forward. But maybe somebody else on the line has a better response.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I asked the wrong person, but in my current job, with First Army, I command or I train a lot of these MEBs and engineer brigades, and what we often find is that unless they go to a warfighter, they don't often get that high con. They don't get that stimulus for working for a higher echelon, either division or corps, right? And it's really hard to replicate that with response cells, and so they really need that. They need that customer to work for, and it's hard to just replicate it unless they nest into a warfighter. So any chance I think these MEBs or engineer brigades can get to work for a division or corps, the better training they're going to get out of it, in my eyes.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Thanks for the questions, folks. Hey, Jim Rector, sir, what else do we have served up here tonight?
Well, if you want to, we've got about 20 minutes. If you want to go through this CTC best practice, Colonel Harless is on net. But I think that's probably going to be more than enough for tonight. So we can pause it, or we can go ahead and go forward with the CTC best practices.
Hey, Adam, if you're on the line here, please take the mic.
Roger that, sir. Hey, good evening, everybody. Colonel Adam Harless. I'm the Director of Training Leader Development here at the Engineer School, and we're working through some of the one slider on the best practices from COMPO II, 3, focusing out from the Sidewinder team at the National Training Center. I think the biggest takeaway in what everyone on the force has got to understand is, we can't fight without COMPO II and 3. That's the takeaway. It is a kind of one team, one fight. So lessons learned, I'll tell you, are very similar to what we see regardless of COMPO getting ready to go. So the lessons learned, although these are pulled from COMPO II and 3 units that have gone through, they're really total Army lessons learned that are applicable across the thing. Before I kind of get into details, it's the fundamentals: shoot, move, and communicate, and how we do that as engineers. The ability for COMPO II and 3 to enable the brigade combat teams. In the yellow box there, I think the big takeaway is just being able to increase the number of blades to BCT. Their ability to develop engagement areas and improve survivability is just so significant. You lose a blade team, or you gain a blade or a blade team. Anyone who's been out and been able to train in that type of environment understands the significant impact across the force that has. With the early integration, as units get linked up to go through rotations, is the early integration, and it's applicable not just for CTC rotations, but any type of joint operation that you know is coming. The earlier you can link in, definitely as engineers, the better off we're going to be. You get to understand how that unit's going to fight, how they see the fight playing out, and how you support their vision coming into reality as an enabler. Specifically for the CTC rotations, if able to get in and do part of the unit train ups and get in, gunnery is ideal, but the staff LPDs are very significant, really set a stage to build that cohesion. And it's a lot easier to fight next to someone that you spent time with, you broke bread with, you've taken a coffee with. Those are those little things that you can't do if you're just not there. The informal integration parts, not just the formal capabilities and quantities within those capabilities that you bring. Regarding the command post, is to get your command post and set it up. I mean, whether it's annual training or battle assembly, and getting all the command post functions and exercises set up, how you operate them, how your staff operates them, both all the shifts that could potentially be managing your command post for you, and then be able to take them down, jump the talk, and set it back up. And just simple things, setting up talk in a corner of the motor pool or a corner of a field, get everything up and running, the COMEX is complete, and then jump to talk. Even if you just jump it, 100 feet or 100 yards, it really makes a difference. It's painful, and that's why a lot of times units don't do it, regardless of compo. But as leaders, those are the things. If we're going to get better every time we do that. And then nested within that is you get the COMEXs. What we've seen, this is across every unit in the Army, is we'll do a COMEX, we'll call it good, but it was the perfect COMEX. There's no issues with the vehicles, no issue with the power supply. We did it, took 2 days setting it up. It works versus jumping that talk. How long does it take to get those systems back up? And you want to link that to the execution of the fight. Is how you're going to fight the pace plan. Does everyone on your team, when you jump your talk, understand the pace plan to your higher headquarters, to the brigade combat team, and also the pace plan within your own formation? So are people working on the right comm systems, getting the COMEXs done? What's priority through the pace plan, and be able to validate that up and down. And across the whole thing, what's been very consistent is the warrior task and battle drills. And it goes back to my original comment about the shoot, move, and communicate. We got to get the fundamentals right. The secret sauce is just doing the simple things extremely well and getting that band of acceptance. And the way we get that, build the confidence in the habits of our units as leaders, is making sure the warrior task and drills are known, understood, and be able to be executed at that 10 level. And then when that confidence is built, getting into the MOS stuff, and here really focusing on the command post communications, not just in the CPs, but throughout the subordinate units. And when you have that down, it's much easier to focus on the integration with the higher headquarters, because you're not trying to figure out how to execute with the tools you already have. And you know exactly what the delta is when you link in on that integration. Again, you come with the capabilities and you understand the quantity of those capabilities, whether it's how much blade time you have with your team or what type of comms package you have, so you can sit down and identify the requirements, and particularly identify the resources you bring to that brigade combat team to ensure that we're enablers and not distractors as we set in. With the context of the CTCs, it's similar to what we see at a JRTC and JMRC. And I'll say we do an annual CTC conference here at the Engineer Schoolhouse to make sure we're getting the lessons learned from the 3 CTCs and getting them back into the PME. And this slide here is very nested with what we've seen historically the last several years. So I think the takeaway, if you go back to your units and in conversations, is do the fundamentals well, where you can do the fundamentals without having to have extreme oversight, and allow those leaders to go out and conduct that integration and planning and understanding how those BCTs are going to fight and how you fit into that fight, and not having to spend your time worrying about the 10 level task, because your 10 level tasks are taking care of themselves because you got the fundamentals locked in. That's the basic brief on that one. Subject to any questions. Over.
Let's go with respect, sir. Let's first go with Matt, and then we'll go with General Pippy.
Hey, sir, Major Brolsman here, Commander 107th Engineer Battalion. Have you seen any a new KEKI MTO go through a CTC yet? And are there any specific feedback on the organization and specific training? I know ours here in the Guard, we don't have our volcanoes yet, so it's kind of hard to train on that specific counter mobility task. But have any of the active duty units experienced that as well?
I'll start off with the volcanoes. Yeah, we've been running volcanoes through the CTCs for a couple of years now with the units that have them up and running. And we've gone out from the schoolhouse to help train some of the units and get them regrained, if you will, with the maintenance operations of them, some of the tactical employment. Then for the Keck eyes going through the rotations, I believe there have been some that have gone through. I will tell you, one of the things that's been done is we've pulled the lessons learned from the combat engineer companies that were going through. I mean, we had combat engineer companies up until 2012. So it's really, we're looking at about a decade without them. And those lessons learned were maintained pretty well. So there's minor tweaks to what those lessons were 10 years ago and how those Kecks are fitting in. And, but I do know just from some offhand conversations on other topics, I believe some of the Keck eyes have gotten the rotations in. Most of the Keck eyes, I haven't seen a lot of feedback yet. We expect to get more to be placed across PME this November, December, and we do this fiscal year 25 conference. I know it's not the perfect answer, but they're starting to see them come through. And then back to the volcanoes, we've got on the Engineer Skills Network through the front page at the Engineer Schoolhouse, we've been establishing all the digital training that we can with the system, specifically the volcano. So the videos and some of the IMI training aids that came out with it originally, we've reestablished on the Teams link on there. If you have any problems getting to that, please reach out to me directly, because that's my team that's got that being put together. And it's a hard effort by the Commandant to really expand the training to units that are looking for it without having to have physical teams come out. Over.
Hey, Adam, just to help Matt, as if he was asking this follow-up, you mentioned a conference with the CTCs later. Can you expand on that very briefly and then let us know how, who will be informed by that conference?
Yes, sir. So every year, generally November, December, we'll do a conference led by the Department of Instruction here at the Engineer Schoolhouse with the 3 CTCs. And what we do is we take the lessons learned, best practices, initially from a planning and training management perspective, so we can incorporate that. The main focus we use that for is within the Engineer Captain's Career Course. So as those captains are going out, and they're going to be primary staff planners at the both battalion and brigade level, and near-term company commanders. We also take those lessons learned and put them into the Engineer Basic Officer Leader Course, EBOLIC. So the lieutenants have a general idea of the science we teach them in the blocks of instruction, and we're able to take the vignettes and stories from the National Training Center, JRTC and JMRC, and tell the stories and help with the art of employing the science. Because what we have heard is the engineers are usually number 1 or number 2 behind maneuver of understanding engagement area development and MDMP processes. But what they were seeing was they were great on the science, but not so great on the art of employing that science and being able to visualize it. So it drove here at Leonard Wood, 1st Engineer Brigade with the schoolhouse has created an engagement area on the ground at one of the training areas with a anti-tank ditch and obstacles that they can go out, see a briefing, and then physically go out and see what that looks like, life-size, real world. And we also take those lessons learned and provide them to the NCO Academy, so our engineer PME can take those vignettes and current lessons learned by MOS and get them put in. Sir.
Thanks, Adam. Superb follow-up question, Matt. That was really the standard. Hey, I'd like to give General Pippy a chance, and then after General Pippy, want to give it to our regimental CSM. John Pippy, sir, do you have something?
Just real quick, Steve, good comments on the brief. Earlier, General Daly asked, how would this alignment help? One of the things we're looking at from the guard perspective, specifically to CTC rotations, is a whole of guard effort. So once you start having these informal relationships being built, rather than sending units with 85% manning, if transferring or allowing people to support, so we send fully manned and equipped units or with the rotation. It may not be in your primary slot, but you're still going to develop that generational readiness. That's where we'd like to get to down the road. So having these interactions, I think, will be very helpful. Over.
Very good copy. Sir Major Plummer, you're net.
Sure, thank you. A couple of thoughts to share. So as General Pippy's talking about COMPO II integration, it reminds me of a couple of lessons that I've learned over the last few years. Number one is we don't necessarily have to wait for an official alignment to our COMPO II and Three Brothers. I think what we found out at the brigade level was making those relationships and then figuring out from COMPO I perspective how we can help out Compos 2 and 3 when it comes to training. So we would align some of our training with theirs and able to help train wet gap crossing, for example. But then also too, life just happens. And when life happens in Compo 2 and 3, they'll miss out on training opportunities. So on Compo 1, what we did is we would open the opportunity for those that may have missed an annual training or a battle assembly is to link in with one of either the brigade staff or a warfighter or the battalions during troop construction to kind of help still keep the training levels higher within the Compo 2 and 3. So that's a way. And then forgive me, I didn't catch the gentleman's name talking about volcanoes and the Keck Eyes. I just want to put a plug out there for STID, and what we've done at the schoolhouse is establish a team's training site. So if you think about planning out sergeant's time training or how-to guides and videos to train on the volcano or the Miklik, we have that ability. It's on Teams. It's a complete file system we're working on every MOS we've got. But if anybody's interested in that training resource, you can get a hold of me or Colonel Harless and his team, and we'll get you linked into that team site. And if you go back a couple of issues of the Engineer Blast, all the information is in there as well. That's all I have, sir. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Sergeant Major. Thanks for your thoughts. Hey, Jim Rector, I see we have 2 minutes left. Is that right, sir?
Yes, sir. I didn't know if you wanted to let see if Jim Rowan had any comments before we turn it over for your final comment, sir.
Yeah. Hey, Jim Rowan, sir, do you have any thoughts for the group tonight?
No, I do not. AEA is proud to sponsor these and partner with the school and the regiment, and we hope to continue this good policy. And thanks to all for your participation and leadership. Over.
Hey, great. Thanks, Jim. Hey, in closing, folks, this is from the regiment to our professional association, the Army Engineer Association. Thank you, Jim Rector and company, for taking on this burden to help sponsor this for us. We owe you topics, and so folks in the field, please talk to again that different topics have different draws, right? But I believe the intent as laid out by General Watson, and really the vision is company level leadership is really the we're trying to touch here, and some topics are more apt for different levels. But please talk to your folks as you have your own LPD programs and talking with peers and such. If you have ideas, just reach out and we'll make it happen. And so just thank you so much. Séance.